to Speaking and Speech with Kiki. This is lesson number 9. Last class we talked about rhetorical questions. I hope that everybody did the reading because it really showed how you can use rhetorical questions as a tool to get your audience to actively listen. Active listening is better. It is more engaging for the audience. They feel like they're participating, which is good. If they're participating, if they're actively listening, they're more interested, which is good. More open to what you're saying. I also thought it was a great way to introduce a subject. Why is it important to exercise our right to vote? Voting is important because rhetorical question, and that's my way of introducing the next thing I'm going to talk about. Today, I'm wearing my very happy shirt because today we're going to talk a little bit about sensitive topics. Sensitive topics are money, religion, sex, gender, death. There's a lot more. If you're Korean, you may have asked the age of the person you're talking to, and they may have given you a strange answer like, well, how old do I look? Or, why do you ask? Because Korean, the relationship between people, it's all about how old you are. If you're not similar in age, you can't really be friends because of a respect issue. You have to respect what they say, you talk less, you listen more. But that may be an issue if you're asking people what their age is, because a lot of people, especially women, don't want to say how old they are. They are not comfortable with that. It's not part of Western culture. Today we're going to talk about how to talk about sensitive topics. First of all, I'd like to say that if you do want to talk to people about a sensitive topic, you should ask for people's opinions. It's one way you can do it. Can I ask you something? And they'll say yes, and you say, why don't American women like to talk about their age? If you ask someone, if you can ask them a personal question, they don't necessarily feel okay saying no. So try to ask it a different way. Try to say, do you mind talking to me about religion? I have some questions I'd like to ask you. That's a great way to start a conversation with somebody. Do you mind telling me about Judaism? I actually don't know that much about it. Perfect. No problem. I'd be happy to answer some questions. So asking questions when talking about sensitive issues is really, really helpful. And then remember, when you're getting the answer, there are a few cues that you might want to know. So for example, if you say, you don't have to answer this, but how many Americans do you think actually support Donald Trump? And then the person may not want to talk about Donald Trump, and they may say, well, I don't really know that much about it. Cue. You can ask a different question or move to a different topic. They either don't know or don't care about this subject. So here's some tips. If you're talking to a foreigner and you're asking them about a sensitive topic, and they're saying, okay, well, this is how it is for me. What is it like in Korea? Try to be brief because you'll get lost. Sensitive topics are sensitive because they're complicated. There's no one answer. Be positive. Try to be sensitive to other people's different opinions. Don't use bad language. Don't get excited about it. Don't make negative statements about other people. It's hard to stay emotionally distant. If you're talking to an African American about race in America, they are going to get very emotional if they've experienced terrible things. You have to stay positive and don't try to push them if they don't want to talk about certain things. Try to use questions to ask about specific topics. Just talking about religion in general will be a 2-hour conversation where they talk about everything. Try to be clear as to what did you hear and what do you think about what you heard. If you want to talk to me about being Jewish, well, what do you already know about Jews? Something like that. Make sure to describe your feelings, to label your feelings, making I statements like, I haven't experienced racism personally, but I've heard that this and this happens. Do you know? Do you feel? Because you don't necessarily know how other people feel about it. Offering an understanding statement. I can understand how that feels. Remember, saying you understand how something feels is nice, but it's not always going to be accepted. You know, if you're talking to an African American and they're talking to you about race problems that they have, you as a non-African American might not be able to understand. That's okay too. Remember that when the person shows they're uncomfortable, try to change the subject to something more light, or finish the conversation and say, thank you so much for talking to me about this. I know this was difficult, but it's so important for me to better understand the situation. You know, it's not easy to talk about. Religion. Okay, so I'm Jewish. I don't know how much you already know about Judaism, but there's a lot of information out there. You can easily find some explanation about it. I'd like to clarify 2 points. One is I said half Israeli, half American. That means that I'm Jewish, and in case you don't know what that means, it doesn't mean anything. That I'm from Israel, so I'm obviously Jewish. That's not true. If you're from Israel, you could be Muslim, you could be Jewish, you could be Christian, you could be Buddhist, you could be a lot of different things. The main population, about 6 million people there, are Jewish or identify as Jewish, not necessarily religious. That's the second thing. I said, if you don't know anything about Judaism, what it means, it doesn't mean anything. What I meant was, Judaism is a religion, a belief in one all-powerful being that controls everything. And I personally don't believe in that understanding of the world. I'm not against it. That's not part of my life, but I grew up in Israel where the tradition was Judaism, and I identify as Jewish. I also grew up learning a lot about the Holocaust, World War II, and the way people understand Jews as being a certain thing. If somebody like Hitler were alive and doing what Hitler did, I would be taken away, I guess. I identify culturally, I identify historically, and that's what that means to me. Everybody can believe in their, it has nothing to do with proof. It has nothing to do with anything but believing something. So you believe this to be the truth, and that's your way of seeing the world. All right, I'm fine with that. What I'm not fine with is when people choose to accept prejudice as truth. For example, in Korea, I've often been told, when I tell people I'm Jewish, they say, oh, you must be rich and smart. And I say, please don't say that. That's not okay. Even positive things are still prejudiced and just have nothing to do with reality. Reality and prejudice, they seem connected, but they're not connected. It's like saying all Koreans smell like garlic. They don't. And thinking that doesn't make you sound smart. It just doesn't. Prejudice is a tool people use to make sense of the world. That's fine. When they talk to people of similar way of thinking, they can use prejudice as shortening the argument. You can just say, well, Jews. do this. If you're talking to people who believe the same thing as you, it's shorthand, it's easy. But when you're talking to other people who may not see the world the same way as you, using those prejudices as a shortcut is not valuable, it's not smart, and it can be really hurtful, especially when those prejudices are negative. Sensitive issues are sensitive for a reason. Personal experience changes people. Usually, polite society, we don't talk about those things, but how can you learn about it if you don't talk about it? And if you would like to hear more, that's fine. Ask me a question. You should be practicing how to talk about sensitive topics. Think about a sensitive issue that you have a personal relationship with, like my explanation about Jews and Israel and that complexity. Pick one point you want to talk about that issue and make a video like mine. All right, guys, try, make mistakes, and keep going.